You know, our next guest, Anna, is absolutely incredible because she's doing some really cool holistic work with fascia tissue. And this is the connectivity thread of all the things. You know, in our yoga teacher training, they threw around the phrase, the issues are in the tissues. And I feel like you're going to be able to answer exactly why is that. So welcome to the show, Anna.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad to be here with you guys.
It's so cool to hear about your journey, to get to learn more about you. But I would love for you to share, how did you get into this work and what has your journey led you on to be able to learn more about yourself in the process?
Oh, great question. Okay, so yeah, I wasn't always trying to be a fascia person. In fact, it was the opposite. I was an artist and wanted to be an actress and a dancer and a writer. And at 18, I started having a lot of body issues. And I felt like I was in a body that was 80, and it was a really big contrast with the complications that I was having. I went to a lot of professionals and tried to ask them, why am I having this? Why am I having that? And the symptoms were so diverse that it kind of made you feel really crazy. Like some of it was like, I felt like I had done the hardest workout of my life, where you can't take your shirts off, or you can't like sit down on the toilet and you're like so sore. And then other symptoms are like gastrointestinal. And so I would go and have a colonoscopy and they'd come back and be like, you look great, you're so young and healthy. And then some of them were even more like drastic, where I was actively running to keep in shape as a dancer. And I would like go out on a Monday and I would run through Golden Gate Park with 7-8 minute miles and just clipping along, feeling like I was in great condition. And then by Friday, I would do a run and I felt like a 10-pack-a-day smoker. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, I can't get breath. I feel like I can't get up this hill. My muscles are burning. And so all of these kind of things were really volatile. And early on, I also noticed a connection with my emotionality and with the things that were going on in my relationship. And in fact, I think some of these symptoms started to show up after I had done some really significant emotional and spiritual work. I lived for 4 months in a mountain cabin all by myself in the middle of the Rocky Mountains, trying to heal some really, deep wounds of sexual abuse and trauma and eating disorders. And so as soon as I kind of did this deep soul spiritual work, my body's like, great. Now that we have a really structural foundation, something that's solid, you're not going to melt down. I'm going to hand you some more stuff to deal with. And I got to work through a lot of that in my tissues. And it started me kind of creating and understanding the whole perspective, the whole being perspective from body to soul, and what that connects. And along the way, I discovered fascia. And I had been trained in Pilates and a bunch of different yoga trainings. And so I wasn't foreign to good movement and what it was supposed to look like. And I'd had really great dance training. But I also noticed that a lot of the stuff that I was doing and being taught in these modalities would also flare me up. So after about a journey of 25 years, I started being like, okay, I'm working with my fascia. It's not what people are saying. And when I started 25 years ago, fascia was really a manual technique, or a tissue that would be worked on like by a massage therapist or a foam roller or by Feldenkrais techniques. And so it wasn't as like in the movement thing. And I noticed that movement was the most influential on my fascia, and that kind of threw me into different sciences and why and hows. And I ended up discovering that I could do something with fascia that was very unique, and it changed everything about what I was doing in terms of how I used my body and then what the healing that it provided me. And so that's kind of the general scope. And now I run a company that is dedicated to holistic body care. It's not really fitness, although we use movement. So a lot of people are used to seeing movement as like fitness and exercise, but there's an entirely different scope because of what fascia wants, that it's like you use movement rather than manual therapy to change, remodel, restructure, and greatly influence all your body systems. So that's what I do.
Oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack
I
here.
thought the
I know,
same thing. I'm
sorry.
like, I should have been taking bullet points for like all the things.
But I want to go back to something that is not going to deal with tissue, and that is, tell me about the 4 months in the cabin.
I knew you were going to go there. My question as well, to tag on, not to be like, bombard you, but what tools did you use while in the cabin? That was the question.
Oh, okay. That's really interesting. Okay. So, well, there's two things. Number one, I'm driving on a highway at 18, maybe 19 in San Francisco. I was in this like kind of really toxic lesbian relationship. And I had this divining moment where my body and my soul was like, if you don't go home to Colorado, if you don't go and deal with your shit, your life and your trajectory, your journey will be forever altered. I pulled over on the highway and was just tearing. I called my mom. I'm like, can you pay for me to come home? She's like, yeah. And I said, well, I really want to go to Estes because I didn't want to be at home. So we have a thing, it's right outside Rocky Mountain National Park. It was a little cabin, and my mom said, sure, you can stay there. And I would drive 2 hours each way to my therapy sessions and just live in this cabin. And I think it was mostly just the isolation of just not having other people's inputs, that I was journaling, I was doing the artist way, I was spending a lot of time just being like clutter, clear, and trying to figure out like, what is the source? Because I had done already, since I was 14, I'd done years of therapy. And I'm like, why isn't this healing? Why isn't this healing? And so it was one of the things in the mountains. I was like, oh, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. Because you can spend years and years applying yourself to a method or a principle but if you're not doing real work, like the stuff that's transformative, and what are those symptoms? So I just lived with a literal knife under my pillow. I was terrified. I'm in the middle of the forest. I didn't know what would come in. I was close enough to town that I was like picturing people like trying to get in windows, and gave me a lot of strength and courage. But one night in particular, I found a picture of myself that like disassociated. I was like, what a beautiful little girl. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, that's me. Why do I think she's beautiful, and why do I hate myself so much? And so I ended up writing a love letter to my child. And that night I had incredible dreams where everything was revealed to me, how my abuse happened, who it was, why it was happening. And I get the goosebumps still talking about it, because it was like this download, like all of a sudden my body was like, okay, I trust you. Okay, you're not the enemy. Okay, now I can give you more. And so I just lived up there and just did the work, scared, terrified. You know, real work is, I think, so much more unsexy, kind of like we were talking about before we turned on the camera, of like, what seems sexy is not sexy, but the real work is really freeing and liberating. So that's what I did for 4 months. And I made enough progress that I could rejoin life at a stabilized place and then move forward from there. I had a seed of true for me to be able to really work on myself.
Gosh, it just makes me think about the story of the butterfly. In the chrysalis, it is a hot fucking mess, but on the other side is that beautiful life. And in the cabin, like Chris, one of his hypnosis meditations that he guides us through at our retreats is meeting your spirit guide, and we call it going to the cabin. So I find it really interesting that you isolated yourself to meet with your soul, to meet with your guides, to be able to heal all that trauma. I mean, because #me too, sis, you know, and that's been a lot of the healing work I've had to do through expressing my, like finding the healing in my physical body, to only dig deep enough to realize that it was an emotional dis-ease or an emotional trauma that I just haven't let go since childhood. And now we know we have the choice. So it's beautiful that you open up and shared your journey of getting vulnerable and getting raw and real with yourself, because I always say it's worth the work, but it is not easy.
It is not easy. And I feel like that's so courageous, right? If you're willing, I think life, if you're listening, if you're willing, it won't let you not. Right? Like, don't you find that you got to this place where you're like, I'm just going to manicure, right? I'm just going to trim. I'm not going to remodel. And you're like, okay, fine. I can function like this for a while, but pretty soon your roof is caving in and your heart is collapsing, and you're like, I have to do something that's more significant. I can't just like put wallpaper on and paint and make things keep looking pretty. Manicuring life is really different than like, let's remodel, let's like rebuild. And I think that that's the kind of deep work that is soul satisfying, and doing it, then you gain the rewards. So it's not, the hard is worth something, right? The hard has power and potential.
You know, I'm really constantly amazed at the amount of successful people that I have as clients or that know personally, but you get behind the closed doors and you get them to actually, maybe they're drinking, maybe they've relaxed enough for the night, and then suddenly you hear the real stuff start to come out and you're like, oh my gosh, you're hurting. Like I had no idea, because you're so good at playing a character. You're so good at playing a role. A lot of people use wealth to mask things that are deep down. And a lot of times we worship people who are wealthy. I mean, it's sort of built into the society that we have now. And a lot of us don't realize like just the amount of stress, the amount of trauma, the amount of everything, the amount of like duct tape and string that's holding those people together. And if it just a little bit goes wrong, though, they are just totally off the rails. And it just goes to show that that none of us get to escape from this.
None.
You can run, you can be the best sprinter in the world, but I promise it always follows you. It is just the same distance away. It's just that meter stick away from you.
Well, and in fact, I think sometimes someone could, it's arguable that when you have more to mask. You actually have a harder time getting to it. There's an old, Bible story, I think, I don't know, from the Bible Belt down in Texas, that's talking about like it's easier for the rich man to get through the eye of a needle, or camel to get through the eye of a needle, than a rich man into heaven. And it's this kind of metaphor, which is like our wealth and our distractibility, our materialism completely distracts us from actually going to soul deep, to like what truly matters. And the poorer you are, when you don't have things to mask it, all of a sudden you're like, I need to deal with this. And I think that's really the crux of true spiritual growth. I, as you know, was living in LA for a while, and it was like really disheartening. There's a bunch of movements of spirituality that are like laws of attraction, and you're manipulating the universe to create what you want. I'm like, that is so not the root of true deep spirituality, like Buddhism, where it's like, life, dude, is suffering. Life is in the struggle, and it's the struggle that makes you refined. It's the pressure of life that makes you the diamond, not I'm going to molecularly choose to like organize and create my own. And it's like, great, but the universe doesn't bend to you. Life is asking you to yield. And that's one of the lessons of fascia, is like yield and be the martial artist. Don't be the like come out American boxer who's going to just like, hit through life and bang it out. You're like, okay, let me get some finesse in here anyway. So I feel like that is true, that the richer you are, oftentimes it masks even more. And how do you strip down to the elements, to the essentials?
I think that's so important. And when you talk about fascia and being able to yield, I couldn't help but think of the word flow. And I think that's such an important way to approach life, is yes, we can co-create and we can, take action, choose to take aligned action, but also you can't control that our cat died last week. You can't control that my dad died 2 years ago. You can't control some of those things. And I think it's exactly what you say, is you wouldn't grow, you wouldn't change or transform if there wasn't that opportunity for you to discover more of yourself, for you to find that resilience and grit. And, one of the lessons I teach in my program, Shine School, really revolves around the hard shit that we went through in the past, and how does that play a role in the development of the character that can't be taken away. You can take away the money, you can take away you can delete my Instagram followers, fuckers, but you cannot take away my courage and my passion and my fucking resiliency. Like, those are the things that you can't take away. And those were given as a gift to you through the hardships in life.
That's right. Those are the true gifts. I love that. That's really funny. I love you for so many things, especially what you said about Instagram.
Well,
such a relationship with it.
It's funny because I had this idea. I was going to ask you this question, but I was really curious to dive into fascia, but fuck it. Let's just go there. One of the videos that made me fall in love with you was you just like letting loose on how much you don't like being on Instagram, how you're frustrated with showing up, and sharing this gift and this passion of fascia and how it can help to heal and connect and all the things. Like, we know that your passion and your drive is there. It's like same behind the principles of the elevated life and why we want to continue to share this wisdom and these tools for transformation. But, showing up in an algorithm and a this and a that and a culture and a this and crazy and TikTok and holy fucking shit, you really like broke down on this video and you were like, I'm frustrated. And as both of us as generators, frustration is our antithesis. So I'm like, I feel that at such a soul level, because there's sometimes where I'm like, I'm feeling this. I have so much magic to share. And then there's other times where it's like, ugh, this feels awful. I don't want to do it. I just want to go live in I want to live in the woods for 4 months. Okay. So can you talk about what that journey's been like as someone who is grounded yet fully aware and has a mission and a soul-driven mission and a passion so deep and trying to get it out into the world? How can you take us on a little journey there?
Yeah, let me see if I can. That's so much to unpack. You tell me that all the time, and now I get to say it back. It's great. So look, I feel like this kind of stems off and flows from this conversation of not heartache and not hardship, but like this grind, right? Like, we are carbon life forms, and there is like oxygen and blood and flesh and bone. And I think it's really unfamiliar to us in chemical, compound bodies that are constantly creating a summation, some an approximation of what is real, right? the carbon of our body's like, okay, I'm having this experience, and it throws together this chemical cocktail. And it's like some, serotonin, some adrenaline, some noradrenaline, shake it up here with a little bit of vermouth, and you're called anxiety. Here you go. And you're like, okay, so this experience. And so we're constantly trying to like adapt and become fluid and become malleable to what life is having. When you meet these things that are completely synthetic and completely arbitrary, I think our registers are like, I don't know what to do with this. Number one, we are potential spiritual beings who are working through our material body, right? And so if we get stuck in this material zone, which is all algorithm and it's not analog, right? I always talk about the difference between the digital versus analog life. And analog life is like scratchy, and music is rough, and it feels, and it's hard, and it's, playing the country music and losing your dog and your girlfriend and your house and your, right? And so
your Instagram followers. It's a new remix.
Real to this. And when that happens, our first thing is not to get on Instagram and just be like, right? That's not the creative process that springs from our soul. We're working through this. And so all of a sudden, I feel like the battle is between like really being deeply human and being in this like digital age that's asking you to be everything that's not. So we're polarized by soulful expression and secularism, which is just drawing us out. And it's the polarity of like inward versus outward. And this kind of experience is actually governed by fascia and the experiences that it collects for you. And it registers in a part of your brain called your insula. And the insula is where your brain is computing values to things. It's not just, I feel a sensation of, on my skin, or I feel the sensation of hunger through interoception. It feeds to the brain, and the brain says, I feel hurt about losing 200 followers, even though I know it's a total bunk system, or I feel rigid about, getting completely dissed by this book publisher. How do I show up and do this work and maintain my humanity? And I feel like the only way to do that is to go inward, which is what I love about fascia. Number one is that you have to go in, and it's everything literally that's poetic to life, like quieter, more subtle than the loud beating drums that distract us. And it's about dropping in and feeling the inner motion, the tensions that are really pulling at us, instead of the I shoulds out there. But how do we do it on the inside of us here? And so I feel like that's been my journey of like, I don't want to, like, why do I have to constantly be out there performing for you when actually the real work is coming from in here? And then I'm like, but then how can I be of service? How do you get the message of being of service when the only way that we're taught that we can reach people is through this medium that feels so non-cohesive to who we are as soulful beings in progress? People trying to cultivate the elements that actually refine us as creatures and build a soul, right? And so I don't know the answer. I just know that people like you out there sharing this, and people who want to connect and build this continuum from their body to their soul, to have practical tools to be able to start this journey, that's why we do it. And I feel like I tried to, in the last year, just give myself grace and be like, I don't want to do this right now. I just don't. And it's okay. And if I lose some followers, that's fine. And I think the biggest thing is just grace, right? What stands in the gap between two extremes? The terrestrial earth, this spiritual destiny, where it's so much tension all the time. Like, where do we stand? And that's with grace, right? Grace to ourselves, grace to others, generosity of experience.
That's just beautiful. This is just something that I feel like all the people who figured it out, all the people figured out that we're sort of here to serve, figure out our own stuff, and then serve from there. We're all dealing with the same thing you're talking about right now. It's like, where do I find my place? How do I do it with integrity? How do I use some of these platforms that have very much changed and very much honor certain things that maybe I'm not necessarily about, or I'm not really politically charged all the time. I don't always want to talk about it. And just I want to talk about like what's right here in front of me. I want to talk about the people that I love. I want to talk about the things that I'm enjoying doing, not necessarily what's going on the other side of the world, not necessarily what the law is happening right now. It becomes too much. And I can't focus on the good that I can actually do, because a lot of things I can't help. It's totally a distraction. So I want to circle back and talk about the fascia. What I want to know is, how does the average person know, hey, my stuff's messed up, I need to get this worked on? Or is it something that everybody needs to do? And how do they begin to get started?
Oh, great. Okay, so fascia, it's pretty, if you've hit 30, you can pretty much guarantee that your fascia has been compromised. Just put it out there. We're born with 300 anatomical movements, and by the time we're 20, we have less than 30. So we have cataclysmic loss in our motion, and motion is restorative to fascia. It's what keeps your electromagnetic grid, the smart grid of fascia, online and working, energetics, right? And so if you're 30, most people start being like, something's happening. It doesn't matter if you're like a workout junkie, you might actually have more liability. Or if you've been a couch potato, it's the other extreme, right? Those two tensions of extreme. And we're looking, fascia loves moderation, balance in all things. It loves just the right amount of tension, not too much, not too little. And so most of the time, if you have digestive issues, if you have knee issues, if you have low back, the most obvious ones are like muscular skeletal, because that's where most people focus on. Myofascia is the organ of fascia around the muscular system, but that's not the only organ of fascia that you have. And so you can start looking at symptoms that are related to endocrine, to your lymphatics. And when you start looking at that, you'll probably see that there's fascia somewhere involved in that. And so I would say that everybody out there should at least do a little deep dive into fascia, into the connective tissue system, because it's really the holistic body system that's running it all. It's behind the scenes operating everything. So once you get a symptom that's up in here, its most likely rooted source is down into the fascia. And so that's why you want to look at it. When you start thinking about getting started, you want to start thinking about 3 things. Let's just do 3 really easy things. Okay. So almost everything that we do is in the influence of gravity, and it kills all of our suspensory systems. And so sitting all day is the same thing as doing a crunch, the same posture, the same action, everything. It loads your adrenal glands, it tightens your diaphragm, this shuts down your visceral organs, which is your microbiome. So it gets really like, not complicated, but it gets extensive and holistic very quickly. The first thing we can do is start to create suspension in the body. Lift your rib cage. We are taught to never lift your rib cage. You need to be able to create your lungs. It's like a petty skirt. The structure of your lungs is not just to inhale and exhale. It's actually to create structural lift to the body. So lifting your rib cage immediately actually opens your heart. You can go from extreme stress to arching over your bed for 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, and you'll be like, oh, I'm in a completely different mindset. And so by opening up your ribs, you turn on your parasympathetic response, you open up your diaphragm, you turn off secretion of adrenal muscles or adrenal hormones that are right at the boundary line of your diaphragm. Inhale and extend your ribs as much as you can. There's a reason as primates we beat our chest and would stick it out. And you want to be able to create these types of lift in your body. The second thing is stop tucking your pelvis to protect your low back when you're sitting in your nice BMW bucket seats. All of this tucking to put your back flat into the mat while you're doing your ab work. We think we're protecting our low back, but you're taking out suspension of your pelvis. When you do that, you're also changing your first chakra. If you want to look at it from a yoga perspective, you're actually collapsing the energetics of your pelvic floor. Stop tucking your pelvis. One way to do this is lift your toes off the floor when you're just standing there. Don't lift onto your toes like you're going onto your tippy toes. Lift your toes off the floor and just observe when you lift your toes off the floor, your pelvis will naturally move back in space and your ribs, the Jenga effect, will move forward. So you lift your toes, your butt goes back, you lift your ribs, goes forward. What does this do? It opens up the center channel of all of your chakras. So instead of being smushed under and pushed back, the ribs lift, the pelvis drops, and you have created 3-dimensional energy tube, a channel for fascia, which carries your own frequency in your spine, and have energetic response. And so those, I would say, are the first 2 things that I would do is lift your ribs, untuck your pelvis. And then it comes down to how you move. And if you have time, I can give you 3 things to do during your day that will totally radically change your body.
Yes, please.
So,
Yes.
all right. So here's the thing. Fascia is 70% water, 30% fiber. It means that when you move more like a water balloon being thrown through the air than a stick being tossed. This is really important because then your movement is based upon fluid mechanics or hydraulics rather than solid mechanics, bones and muscles pulling. 3 things that you need to know about that action for fascia is just simple syringe. When you push a syringe, fluid comes out. When I pull the syringe, fluid fills up. And then there's this third rotation. So every movement you do through your day should either be a push, which is a compression, or a traction. And then we add rotation. And that's kind of like washing your fascia the way that you wash a shirt in the tub. You hand wash and you dunk it and you do this, and that's compression. It loosens fibers. You pull the sweater out of the water and all the water's dripping off and taking the dirt with it. That's traction. And then you wring it out. And as you wring it out, it creates compression and traction. So go to your kitchen sink while your coffee is being made in the beginning of the day. Spread your legs wide, put your toes towards the baseboard of your sink, grab onto the sink and just pull your body back. Are you going to be posting this as a video?
Yeah.
Great.
Get it, girl.
We'll grab onto your sink, you put your feet close, and you just pull and hang as hard and as long as you can. Inhaling into your lungs, and then you come back up. This is traction. When I come forward, I arch, kind of like a cobra in yoga. That's compression. So I traction, and then I compress, and I lean forward, and I take my tissue and I squeeze, and then I pull back. And then I come up and I squeeze. Every single move. You can do this on a parking meter. You can do this on your car door while you're filling your gas. You can do this on a chain link fence while you're walking your dog. You can do this on the back of your golf cart while you're pulling and pushing, preparing your spine to move. So all of a sudden you're getting hydraulic action, which is hydrating. You're moving tension along the fibers. And then the other thing I have people do is rotate. Just put your arms out like the Chinese people in the park, and they're just like twisting their spine. Do this with a rib lifted. If you're used to sitting and crunching into your things, this is not great. Keep your ribs lifted, pelvis dropped, and then you just twist. When you do twisting, it exfoliates your organs on the surface of your ribs and on your pelvis. And it gets all the dead cells off, and it starts to have peristalsis come back, which is the motion of your organs that moves food through, that increases and peaks your metabolism. So these 3 actions, compression, traction, and then rotation starts to clean, free up the tensions in your tissues and starts to remodel your body from sedimentary to suspension. And that lift carries all the way into your mindset.
Gosh, it reminds me every time I do deep twists in yoga, I have to pee immediately afterward. It's
And
like,
just think, yes,
it's
that's
like
that's
gets
so
it all out of there.
It's
It
so
also
funny.
reminds me.
I had a client one time do the exact same thing. Came in, was not just pee, and I have to go right now. We did rotation within minutes. He was like, I got to go to the bathroom. Comes back, he's like, does that happen often? I'm like, well, yeah, actually, deep rotation is so important for your organs to be able to move and detox.
It so is, and just to create balance in our system as well. It reminds me a lot, like you talking about the fascia tissue throughout the connectivity of the whole body. And, to go back to the phrase, issues are in the tissues. It reminds me so much of like the mycelium and the mushrooms and how all of that's connected across the globe of the earth. Like every part of this planet is connected through mycelia, and the mushrooms and the trees are sending so much information through that channel. So it reminds me like, well, if we are, as above, so below, then is our fascia essentially the mushroom of the body?
Yeah, actually it is. It is the sensory organ, communication system, registering. It has 3 times as many sensors as any other tissue in the human body. It is constantly listening, and it communicates proprioception, what's happening outside, to interoception. And that's kind of back to what I was talking about in the insula. It takes all this information, all connected to the sources of our feed of experience, and sends it for processing and determining how we feel about things and our perspectives of things and what we value, which is what contributes to our soul growth.
Yeah, I'll tell you one of the things. It's cool because so many modalities complement each other. So many of them, like you said, kind of have this overlapping feeling. And it's amazing how well the body can naturally heal itself if we will just figure out how to use it. I mean, we never get taught this. I mean, I guarantee you the amount of people who've had a school class on this is not some sort of, even doctors and stuff. Doctors take 4 to 5 hours of nutrition in their entire thing. They think of how big of a deal nutrition is. Like, holy hell, it's the thing.
That's
It's
right.
like it's like the thing. And then it's amazing to think about how for me, once I got into yoga and doing breath work and stuff like that, I originally did it as some sort of a physical movement. I mean, that's, I think, how most of us get introduced to it. And I was thinking about, because I've been in a bad motorcycle accident and I wanted to repair outside of doing physical therapy, because they were very similar movements. But I thought, well, the breath work, I can add this stuff, I can add that stuff, be a really beautiful practice for me to start getting into. And then I started realizing that as I did it, it wasn't a physical movement. It did help my physical body, of course. Any kind of stretching, that's fantastic, because we do sit, because we do crappy movement patterns all day long. But the real thing that it did is that it started to manipulate my perspective. It started to show me new insights. And so it's not only there when I'm in Shavasana, but sometimes I might be there in the shower. And sometimes I might be standing in line at the grocery store. And all of a sudden, boom, that thought comes into my head. And I hadn't thought of it that way before. And that little perspective shift totally alters the course of my life, because I just connect two things together that obviously were always there, that I could have always connected. And if I explain the story to somebody else, they'd be like, duh, like, how did you not, well, you just don't connect it sometimes. Hell, you just don't. But the movement and getting into my body, we spend too much time thinking about whether or not we look good naked to somebody else, even though we don't know what looks good naked to somebody else. I mean, we'll never be able to know that. I have no clue what I hope Britt likes me naked, but she might not. I don't know what's
working for me.
I don't know what Britt looks like. So why am I going to go spend so much time thinking about a prospective person who may like people who don't even remotely look like? But when you start working on it, instead of from just how does my body look, again, not thinking about that external so much, how do people perceive me, but instead the great benefit that we get by not just doing the exercises, but starting to be aware of who we are, starting to be aware of how we feel, starting to be aware of, oh my gosh, when this happens, my emotions sure do roar up. Is that something that I've gone through before? Is this a problem that I need to work on? We start to have that awareness. And to me, it's that awareness that starts to unlock all the little spiritual stuff. Because other than that, you are just ignoring it. You're literally just pushing it to the side and distracting yourself with, this world is fun. I mean, let's not play. We have the best drugs in the world. We got all the kinds of drinks. You can go get anything. And we've gotten to a point now, especially because of COVID, you can get anything at a drop of a hat. I can have a guy here in 10 minutes with whatever food I want. Anything. The whole world. I can have an escort here in an hour. I mean, I can get it all. And the reality is, it would just be a distraction.
That's true.
All that stuff would just be a distraction from the spiritual journey that I'm actually on. And so once I feel like we start making time for this kind of stuff, because it takes a little bit of time. Any kind of body work, any kind of fascial work, anytime, anything like this takes time. You have to put your phone down during it. You have to start getting in tune, and you have to listen. You can't have the technology around you, because then you're not listening. And then suddenly you start going, holy hell, have I been a foreigner to myself my whole life? Like, if I've not even been my own, not only am I not doing the right self-talk, most of us are not our own friend, but I don't even know me. Like, I don't even know I've got these damn problems. Like, what the hell is going on? And I feel like, especially as guys, I feel like women know this intuitively. You see a lot more women who will dance and do movement, and they're a lot more free-flowing, even though they've become a little more masculine, over the last couple decades. But for guys, and we're finally waking up to this, the amount of guys that I've had hug me and cry now and stuff like that, and be okay with it.
I want to see you twerk.
Big dudes, big guys. Of course you do.
It would look good, baby. It would look good. I think that'd be great.
You got to get that energy flowing and that, shake your shakti. Okay. Like,
but I want to ask you, what kind of benefit do you see from this for guys?
So excited you asked that. I think it's quite unique that GST attracts almost equally men and women. Not on purpose. I didn't put it that way, but I think it's because men know they need to stretch. Men like to do hard and rigorous things. And even though GST is very therapeutic in a lot of ways, it really is hard. It's effort, but it's supported. So all of a sudden the guy's like, oh, okay, I can actually do this. Because I know so many men who are like, yeah, I really should do yoga, but I hate it. I just hate it because it's so hard. And I remember that I was so tight and so inflexible that I'm like, this is miserable and I don't want to do this. But as soon as I get the one feeling of potential openness, potential release, like fascia taps much more into your endorphin system than it does to your adrenal system. So as soon as you can tap into fascia, men love it because it's like, oh, this is what I want. This is what I thought I've always needed, but I didn't know that I could. And then it's really intelligent. And so men tend to be analytical. So to go into sometimes yoga for men is just hard because, and even Pilates, it feels so like non-concrete. And here it's like, here's your lever, here's the metabolism, here's where you push, here's how you're going to move it. And all of a sudden they start to have this experience that is really profound. And I have a story about my client. I wanted to say two things and I was going to just tell you this. So fascia is known as the organ of consciousness. And it's not just metaphorical, but when you start stretching fascia, you create internal space. The way that if you pull like woven fibers of a sweater apart, you can create space. That is literally similar to being able to open your aperture on a camera and take in more light or take in more perspective. So as soon as you open your fascia and you start connecting that way, you are literally opening potential for consciousness, for thought and sensation to come in. The tighter and more rigid that you are in your tissues, the more restricted you are in your ability to open and to comprehend and to, have aperture. So for men, I think it's a nice practical way that it doesn't have to be like I have to meditate or I have to transcendentally like reach to the stars. It's like, just stretch like this. And so I had this client, really high end, we'll call him Todd, not his name, but really, very successful agent in LA. And when he first started with me, he had none of this interest in anything spiritual at all. And I never really went there with him. Even in 10 years, I would every once in a while drop a little thing and it would kind of like, I thought go over his head. But we would just do GST. He just did it for his physical fitness. I don't know why I think he liked me rather than that. But when he came in, he was married, had two mistresses that he was keeping simultaneously in their own homes, was about to have a baby, just a fucking mess, right, of a human. And you're like, try not to judge, Anna. I'm like, I'm just here to do your physical fitness. I'm like, what is happening? But as I connected with him and as we started stretching and as we started doing things, literally first year, this dropped off. He'd just kind of be like, oh, I got rid of that. That was making me feel not great. And I was like, but I thought you really, he's like, well, I don't know why, but I just don't like the feeling of that anymore. And so working through these like tensions in his body directly translated, not because of something I was leading him through or a breath work, because all of that's really potent. But what about the people who just are like, practical? Can they still receive benefit? And I love working with men because of that, is that they just want to do the work and they're some of the most committed. There's not as much like inner narrative of complicated mess that sometimes women have, which the body will cut through anyway. But I really love that men like this is like a workout that actually feeds every aspect from tissue, from skin, all the way to soul. And so the answer is men love this stuff because I think they're desperate for it. And I feel like a lot of my friends gear their coaching and their stuff to women. And I'm like, men are being left behind again, right? Because they're not, I don't think it's not that they're inclined to it. It's that they're so good at intellectual and linear thinking that anything out of the scope feels like too much. And so if you can actually get the benefits by staying in those rudders without having to go out, then men are easily accessible to being able to do their own growth. And so I would say probably I'm a little bit more passionate towards working with men for all of those reasons, right? Because it's just, they're left behind, that, they need the soul growth, as you're saying, so deeply, connecting to feeling, having that be okay, wanting to change and grow, losing the baggage that is, tied up in our tissues.
Yeah, and I would tell for every guy that's listening to this, if you don't do this work, you will never have the relationship with your partner or with yourself that you ever think that you could really have. You will miss out, because the second that you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable or to have any kind of emotion around a woman, she's not going to trust you. And what being vulnerable and having the emotional side brings out is the fact that your partner will begin to become also more vulnerable, also more intimate, because that is what breeds intimacy. That's where connection comes from, is you saying, shit, this sucks right now. Let's talk about it for a minute. It's not about being angry and having a bunch of rage and stuff like that. It's about just being open and honest and being like, holy smokes, man, I feel this way. I'm doing these things right now, but I want to make some changes. And just once you start having that conversation, your partner's going to look at you differently, and things can super spark off. We've been doing couples retreats now. And what I've realized is that once men tap into this, and it's my favorite part about couples retreat, and it's the reason why we almost did not have them. People came to us, we were doing women's retreats, and people came up to say, hey, I got to get my partner out here. Like, we definitely need this as a couple to spend some time away from the kids, spend time away from our regular job. be out here somewhere beautiful and just hit it off, go back and remember why we fell in love in the first place. And so I told Britt, I don't want to do it. I think it's stupid. It's not going to work. That's going to be dumb. I'm like, the guys are never going to open up. It's going to never. I mean, I went to an all guy school. I've spent a lot of time around guys. I'm like, no way. We got the guys there. They were the first ones to open up. Almost most of the guys cried. And again, big dudes. You're not talking about they're just small, petite. You're talking about big men, just like look like they could punch through a brick wall kind of guys. And just you see them tear down, but they're doing it from love, which is different. Being emotional because of love or being emotional because you care about your partner and you're expressing your feelings about that is very beautiful. And not only that, but women love it. I mean, they're like, did you say that about me? And it's like, boom, 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 boom. I mean, if you think you want into, how come I'm not getting the best kind of sex in the world? Well, for one, you probably didn't marry a prostitute. And other than that, it'd be great if you would treat her like somebody. Yeah, as somebody who matters.
Really great sex.
Right? I mean, it's just wild how we have, I think maybe because of TV and maybe just because of the movies that we watch, we're kind of told what a man is and kind of told what a woman is. And it just kind of fits this way. And then you realize like most relationships don't work. I mean, most of them, the staggering amount. And it's because we're doing things the wrong way. And the big thing that we're not doing is exploring ourselves. And for all guys, it doesn't even matter what modality you start with, but start somewhere, because that modality will swap into another modality, into another modality. And what will end up happening is you'll find the right one for you. And there's other things just like you're talking about that lend toward the logical mind. That's why I love doing hypnosis with guys, because they're like, oh, I don't believe in that meditation weird shit. I'm like, fantastic. Just close your eyes. I'm going to have you visualize a couple things. We'll call it hypnosis today. It's just like, it's the same shit. It's very much the same shit. And so it's so important for us to not get caught up in the words, but just let ourselves be led into the transformation. And so it's too much.
What's so cool about what you're doing is it's really about the tools. And so I did analytical therapy forever, right? And then all of a sudden I was like, I'm not getting the information I need. And so I went into hypnotherapy, and because meditation didn't seem to work. And I'll come back to that in a second, which is really interesting. But I had all this like story and narrative and talking. I think men do this is like, and women do it too, but men really are like analytical and to get a different stream of information. So you have your intellect and you have your intuition, and one is painting in ones and zeros in this kind of digital, and the other one is painting in technicolor, senses, feelings, expressions, and they both value your ENX called you have to have both. The picture is maybe created up here, but what colors it, what gives it value and meaning comes from those other sensory things. And so for men to be able to tap into that, and you kept talking, I'm like, permission. People just need permission to be like, okay, so this is a feeling. Now, how do we break this down? How do we metabolize? And I like the word metabolism because it works within the structure of the human body, but emotion is a metabolism. You have 9 basic feelings. That's it. Every human has 9 basic feelings, but over 36,000 emotions. The constellation of our emotions is so complex that the deeper you can go in and find those feelings, then you get permission to express them however you want. And that makes you vital. And that's what I think attracts women to men, when they are literally vital. They're not dead basil. They're fresh, fragrant, alive, like you just want to smell it and taste it. And that creates lust, that creates longing, that creates desire, that creates passion, that creates who wants to fall in love. And this is the point about like Instagram and stuff. Like, I don't connect with you by screen. I can't smell you. I can't touch you. I can't feel you. So in the bottom line, it's really a process of becoming more of what we are as humans, right? The more smelly and the more tasteful and the more sensory, the more I can capture you with my fascia, the more sensations I can take in of you, the more alive. And that signals my brain, my human brain, to be like, ooh, let me dig into that. I want to smell that. I want to taste that. I want to love that. And that's what makes me passionate about fascia, because I'm like, it really is about becoming more alive, being that fresh, fragrant basil, not the dry shit you just are trying to like pass off as real. And it's like, come on. And this comes down to what I was going to say is you're doing a nice job of describing this. I call it the divining rod, where your body really is like a divining rod. And back in the 30s, they would have a diviner come out for water. Do you guys know that in Texas?
Like dowsing rods. Yeah.
And they would have electrical current, and it's whether it's a real science or not. The point is that this rod would like divine where there was fresh living water. And I feel like the body is that. It is like what's telling man or woman, this is true. This is vibrating with frequency that I can compute, that I can read, that I know. And that's what makes me want to go more and taste you. Because if it's not real life, then there's this bullshit monitor that we have. And that's why you're not getting laid. That's why you're not having great sex, is because your bullshit monitor is saying this isn't real. And so the accessibility is, how can we become more of who we were created and, you know, evolved, whatever you believe to be, and really get this like divining rod of true. When you step into a relationship, when you step into a moment, feel your body. What is it telling you? Is it saying no? Or is it saying, yeah, that's real. I can connect to that. I can go deeper with that. I can vibe, like literally have frequency exchange with that. And I think that's the value of really like starting at the body, because it's this divining rod, and then you follow it, like you're saying, in your journey. And then there's a little more information that colors it, and a little more information, and you become more whole, more human, more rich.
I feel like you can never have a spiritual connection unless there's reverence and devotion to the sacred vessel that spirit dwells within. So can you talk on, you talked about feeling the body, and as someone who has been through a #MeToo moment, I know through my own fucking crazy ass work that I disconnected from my body. I couldn't feel my feelings. I couldn't feel my intuition that was coming through physical sensations and signals. So for many years I was cut off, and I gained a lot of weight. There's just a lot of issues we had with the body when I was disconnected from that. So as someone who's experienced that and studied that, can you maybe give the next steps for people who are not even like close to feeling their intuition or close to feeling their feelings, like they've totally disconnected from their body? Is it just a lift my ribs and don't tuck my pelvis thing? Or is there like, can we do some more? Can we go a little deeper?
Let's talk about that, because it's a really good question. I want to always go deep. And I find that in Instagram land, everybody's so superficial. I love that we can talk for, you know, at length about this stuff, because it's really deep and purposeful. And when I give those commands, it's like, here's a soundbite. I only have 10 seconds of your attention, so let's give you something. But I'm like, that's cheapening what I actually could really share with you that is life shaking and transforming. So fascia, interestingly enough, is this sensory organ that's super sensitive to feeling. Okay. And when it's traumatized, it literally will shut down, and it will not give you sensation. Or on the other scope, it will give you over sensation, and it will give you so much pain and so much feedback that you can't actually calm it. So there's these two kind of personas inside of the tissue, and it really depends on your own psyche and your own personality and how you relate to the world around you. The idea is that you can take tools. We have like a wood roller that you actually will start from the skin, and you try to go in and you find pain. Okay. It seems antithetical to getting out of emotional trauma to actually re-experience pain. But why you have that pain, or the lack of effect, the disassociation, is because you have not actually processed that which is in your tissues. And so it's almost like going in and waking up through something that you are familiar with. If I'm laying on a wood roller and I feel an ouch, all of a sudden I can be like, what is that ouch? And I can start with this basic questioning, which is what you were talking about, is like, I observe that this is true. Why is it there? And how do I get it to move? These three questions are really important for getting to have feeling, because you want to tap into that which is causing you either the dysfunction or pain or the lack of effect. You have pain in there. It was causing all this weight gain. How can I access it? Kind of like a voodoo doll, right? You're trying to tap in and like poke into your pain. But then it's not just for the sake of feeling the pain. It's like, now that I see you, I can familiarize myself, and I have the skills to move that pain out of my tissue. If tissue is left without relief or without motion, metabolic relief, it actually will take those receptors that I was talking about and make them nociceptors, which are toxic receptors. It's when the brain says something in here is not right. We have to like shut this down, and it becomes a sense of poison for the body telling you something's wrong, rather than I'm in homeostasis. So what we want to do is go in and capture that pain, that lack of feeling, Or if you don't have feeling in one tissue, you go to where there is pain because it's usually source, and then you will spread it out and start having sensation. But all of this starts on the inside of you, and you have to be quiet. You have to calm. You have to be able to go inside and go into the temple, the sacredness of you. And I feel like it's not hard to do, but you have to be able to be like, I am desperate enough. And desperation builds is the genius of invention, right? Where you want to reinvent yourself. And so I think that either extreme, I would say, whether you're disassociated, because a lot of times we're disassociated from the body, but there's pain in there that's keeping us. So that's why you can use the body as a divining rod, tap into that pain of like, what is this? And then start asking questions. What you're so good at is asking questions like, what is this? Where is this? Like, make your brain hungry. It's like a kid in a candy shop. When the brain starts to have new information, it feels sweet. It feels good. It's like, okay, there's potential to change. And that will be the process of awakening trauma. Now, here for the faint of heart, when you wake up, the tiger, you're going to have some roaring. And that always feels destabilizing and scary. And that's why they should come to you or to me or have guides that can hold space and that can be present. And because I remember for the first 3 months after I started opening up my fascia, I was in more pain, but I had more freedom of motion. I said, something I'm doing, I can breathe better. I feel like I have space or opportunity, even though I'm in more physical ailment. And I just trusted. And that comes down to trusting divine, trusting the people who've gone before you, trusting yourself. I feel like most of us are taught to not trust ourselves. And so we have pain and we're like, I'm doing something wrong, or I'm disassociated, I'm fat, I'm doing something wrong. It's like, yeah, you're not listening to your body. Yeah, you're not like orienting your true north, like what you feel is true. And so I think that that's how you climb back in your skin, is just to start somewhere. I remember being so depleted. I'm like, I'm going to start with just this one. Can I get one morsel? It depends on how traumatized you are, right? Like some people can get in and just start the process, or they've done enough work that they feed in. But if you're really, really broken, don't let it stop you. Just start with one moment. And if you master that moment, then you can start mastering the movement of getting that pain out. And as pain leaves, you awaken. And as the awakening happens, then you start being able to breathe and live vitally, and your brain fog clears, and you start this whole vital life coming back.
Oh my gosh. It's so beautiful to talk to somebody who's doing the work, who gets the stuff. And not only that, but you're really able to communicate it in a way that makes it super accessible.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people
she makes fascia fun.
because people try to make transformation really hard. I think we've been taught that it's going to take a long time, and we're taught that it's going to cost us a fortune. I mean, but it's a lot of times it's very simple, and a lot of times it is just getting started. Just fucking do something. It doesn't even matter if you do it wrong. It doesn't matter if you do it the wrong amount of time, or if you don't.
The fact that you care and put in the energy and effort and make that decision. I think the decision is what gets the movement happening.
Yeah, and the big reason why is because you're telegraphing to your subconscious mind when you do that. I have faith and I have hope in that there's something inside of me, or something greater than me, that can overcome what I'm doing. And that whoever needs to come into my experience, maybe I do need a mentor. Maybe I do need to go to a class or sign up for a course, or go find a person. That person you will attract. Someone will come tell you about them. You'll end up browsing, trying to buy some new shoes or something, and suddenly they'll pop up as an ad. It just somehow seems to happen. I attract clients and I don't even know how it works. It's just like suddenly I get really concentrated on one specific problem. We've been doing a lot of stuff with alcoholics lately, having people overcome alcoholism. And so I've been attracting a lot of those clients. So it's really fascinating to find that when you start doing work on certain problems, those people will find you, or you will find them. And it's incredible what we can do if we will begin to have faith within ourselves and realize that there is hope and there's something better on the other side. There's a better way of living.
Totally.
Yeah. I'm really curious, what does your daily movement routine look like? Do you have specific rituals that you adhere to all the time? Are you just like, gotta get in, move my body? Like, what is the structure of your fluid movement look like?
Such a great question. Number one, I do it throughout my day. I live so embodied that it's not like I have 30 minutes, I'm going to go work out. It's like I get off the phone with a stressful thing and I go to my sink and I just drop in. Like my body is my totem. It's like my grounding. It's my lightning rod. It's my divining rod. I just go in and I try to move whatever energy is stuck, because I can move my fascia, and moving your fascia moves the energy. So fascia is the baseline of what we experience as energy motion. And we didn't really get into that, and I won't go because it's a little bit more extensive than we have time for. But the idea is that you just want to keep regular dousing of motion through your tissues flow. Fascia actually flows the energy from all physiological and external functions, and how your heart beats next to your lungs and doesn't collide and doesn't create, like, fascia is what creates that synchronicity of tissue flow. Same thing from outside. So I just constantly am microdosing. A lot of arching for me. I am so familiar with my body that I go into the places where I know rigidity sets in first. I know my holding patterns, and I just try to create fascial flux. It's like a muscle flexing, but you actually create it with your fascia, and it like sends energy and moves the clog and moves it along the line or the grid. I do also work out. I work out with clients, so I usually do kind of what I'm leading them with and what their body's needing. The cool part is that everybody needs pretty much the same nutrition, right? Same as like eating. You need the right vitamins, and you should move your spine all 8 ways every day. You need to like meet all different dynamics with highs and lows and speeds and, you know, changes. So there's these fluid dynamic nutritionals, and I just try to bathe myself. But I think the biggest thing is that when you start tapping into fascia, it feels so good that it's not a chore. It doesn't become another thing to do. You welcome the collision with yourself. You need it. You need it like you need water. In fact, fascia has a reflex that feeds to the same part of the brain as your thirst or your hunger reflex. And so you should have this like urge to move in a way. Dogs do it when they get up from sleeping all day, and lions and all of biological mammals do it. I don't know if the, you know, centipede does it, but maybe whichever has fascia would do this. And so you're longing for this like reflex to be able to start the impulse. And then it's not something to do. It's like you're just in it with your body, in the flow. You're living parallel and embodied, so that you have an experience in your body's like, please help me get rid of that. Oh, I love that. That was joyful. Okay, I love, you know, and it's this like synchronized experience where you're really being true and living vitally in you.
Yeah, I think you described it very well, the embodied. And that's actually, it's so funny. Last week, I messaged my assistant. I said, I'm creating a new course and it's called Embodied. Fuck videos, fuck courses. I'm just showing up live because that's what I do. And I think it's just like really starting to understand, like, what do you need? And that's the question that I ask myself every single morning. What is it that I need in my life?
I have an actual client right now, so I'm just telling him that I'm a little bit running behind. It's totally okay, but I didn't want to ignore him while he's like, where are you? I'm like, I'm coming.
Yep. We can totally wrap it up. So
I love what you just said, though. Let's leave on that note, because I think that is maybe I got a question on the billboard, like, what would you put on a billboard? And I'm like, such a good question. And I think it's kind of along those lines, like, just start with you, find your true. Like, let your body be the divining rod, and then it will guide you. It will guide you into the places that are next for your soul growth and your next transformation, and just cultivating that. What does that look like to just show up as you and feel you, be embodied, and then it will lead you to where you need to be.
It almost answers the final question we love to ask all our guests is, what does living an elevated life mean to you?
Oh, yeah. I think living in right relationship to what is, handling the tensions that life provides, having grace to move those tensions through and metabolize them so that you can show up whole.
That is so beautiful. And if you can share with our elevators where they can come soak up more of your amazing wisdom and how they can get started with GST Body, we would love for you to share.
Thanks. Okay, yeah. Go to my Anna Rahe website, ANNARAHE. Phonetically, it's Rahe. Kind of sounds a little Texas. Rahe. And it's AnnaRahe.com. And then from there, it's a great landing pad to get to GST Body, get to the Vital Life Studio, where you can find our subscriptions to just start moving this into your tissues in your life. If you sign up, I will give you 10% off of any product or subscription. So sign up for our newsletter, and that's how I can get more conversation going with you. Feel free to email me. I answer all of them directly. I really love to be like Fascia and connect. So please come see me. And I'm so grateful I got to spend time with you guys. It's been so edifying and so enriching.
Oh, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
all your wisdom. I feel like I'm going to go like jump on the trampoline now.
Absolutely.
Until next week, we'll catch you later.
Peace.
Thank you. Bye.